Awesome. Okay, welcome guys. Thank you very much for coming. And I'm going to share a story with you about OSXPirrit, which is for me literally the gift that keeps on giving. The obligatory who am I? As of now, I am the head of security research at Cybereason Nocturnus, which is our new research lab that we're building right now. We're also hiring, so feel free to reach out to me either here or over on Twitter. I do lots of different forms of research, malware analysis and low-level research, and just like for shits for giggles, I find exploits on things, and then they turned out into giant botnets. And I shitpost on Twitter a lot. So that's my handle over there. That used to be my profile picture up until pretty recently. And sometimes my shitposting causes a lot of trouble. So I'm Israeli. I live in Boston, but originally I'm Israeli, and I came back from Israel a couple of weeks ago. I was visiting my family, and when I landed, I went to the quick passport control thing where you put your hand in and it tells you that you can go. So I literally crashed the fucking thing with my hand. And I took a picture and I was like, holy shit, that's Windows XP. That shouldn't run there. So I put it on Twitter, and 2 days later, that was a headline. So I should shitpost less, I guess, or more. Depends on how you look at it. Okay, let's start. Just gonna hold this like this. Okay, so what are we talking about here? So I'll give you the background, and if any of you are following me on Twitter, I tweeted a bunch of links yesterday and said, if you are coming to my talk, you might want to read those links because it'll give you some of the backstory. But in case you didn't, I will give you a very, very quick version of it. So back in 2016, I was at home and I was bored and I was in IRC, and someone said, my Mac is acting really weird. Anyone wants to take a look at that? So I talked to that guy and I said, hey, send me some files. It ended up being a new OSX adware malware. For me, it's always malware. There's no such thing as adware. And it was a port for Mac of the Pirrit adware for Windows. And I completely tore it apart, and I did a bunch of write-ups on it and a bunch of talks. And it's like every month I learned a new detail. And after 3 months of reverse engineering this, after I did my first talks, I actually found inside one of the files, so the creators of this adware, malware, whatever you want to call it, they kept pushing updates because after I did all of my talks, they started frantically changing things. And in one of the versions that they pushed out, the new versions, they weren't careful enough and they left their first and last names inside one of the archives. And I stumbled upon it and I was like, okay, LinkedIn. And one guy was the VP R&D and the other guy was just one of the programmers there. And they work for an Israeli company called Targeting Edge. And after I published another article with their faces blurred, and I said, okay, I know who you are. They took down all of their servers and they became quiet for a while. And then in last November, I have some Yara rules that I always run for stuff that I found. And then in November, everything started to light up like a Christmas tree all over a sudden after it was really quiet for a while. I was like, okay. So, as I said, I have a bunch of Yara rules always running for things them doing research for, and they're running on all sorts of different systems, be it VirusTotal or our own product that we develop at Cybereason, and I was like, oh wow, this is rad. And as I said, I shitpost a lot, so I tweeted, and it took a day, and we start getting letters from their legal department. Now, this was very personal, as you can see. Mr. Amit Serper has been referring to our client's product on social media as malware. That's because it is. No, I want to take the time for a second to read it because it's really funny. And there's I worked a lot. The whole purpose of this talk is I worked a lot with our legal department on this, because if you work for a company and you start to get legal threats, be it against you personally or against the company you work for, you need to work with legal. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. So they basically said, we're not doing malware. This is not malware. Everything is legit. I am a quote-unquote expert. Basically, they're trying to say that I'm an idiot. As you can see in the second one, is the cybersecurity expert. Cybereason considers itself as well known and clear to Cybereason that adware is not explicitly malware. Now, they knew that the write-up was coming up because I said that it will come up on Twitter. And they send us letters every day. Sometimes they send us more than one. And every day they change their narrative. So they started with, everything we're doing is perfectly fine. And then they said, we are legitimate adware, and we are not malware, and we are not using exploits. The product nor our client do not spy or takes over the browser. The product does not collect nor store any personal, aggregated, or sensitive information of the user, rather solely technical device data which is used in real time. Isn't that the same thing? The product does not nor does it attempt to exploit any device vulnerability. Remember this sentence. And it was developed, distributed, and functions according to Apple's guidelines. Okay. Please note that Cybereason's claim regarding to the use of AppleScript, we will get back to that, is redundant as such as is legal and legitimate as a feature explicitly designed for developers. So does create remote thread, but still a lot of malware use that, so it doesn't make any sense. The product is not Pirrit or OSXPirrit. Please remember that sentence. As explicitly stated by our client in response to the previous report published by Cybereason, blah, 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 this is not us. Like they're saying, we have nothing to do with this. In contrary to the claims detailed in the abstract, our client is not trying to distance its activity from the Pirrit software. I call bullshit, and you'll see that as well. From the simple reason that the product is not the Pirrit software. Okay. And then they said, and this is like all from different letters. Like we got every day, like we had like new reading materials, and like, like our legal department kept sending me Slack messages. Oh, we have another letter from them. Do you want to read it? And I'm like, of course. Like, bring on the popcorn. And then they said, they gave, like they said, in one of their letters said, we're not malware. Here is what malware is. And they gave a list of like, this is how ESET, the AV company, defines malware. Well, what do you know? They answer to each one of those, each one of those sentences basically describes their product. The product nor our client do not spy or takes over the browser. Yeah. So at that point I was like, okay. So, after they realized that the report is coming, because some journalists talked to me before I published this report, and some journalists actually reached out to them, and they tried to get their response, which was pretty difficult. They realized that it's happening. The report is coming up, so they said, okay, like put this in your report. Like this is a whole blurb that they wrote to us, and they said, like, we demand you to put this in your report. Now, we don't owe them shit. Like, we don't need to put that in our report. But we said, okay. So this ended up being in my report and in this slide, and okay. Like, did you all get a chance to read that? Like, we highly respect the privacy of the users and completely comply with all the... It's not true. So in one of the things they said here, they said, we have an end user license agreement. Well, we couldn't find it anywhere. Like, I double dare all of you to go to their websites, Google Targeting Edge end user license agreement. Just do it right now. There is nothing. And their website also had a contact form and an email address, which doesn't work. So this is Zach Whitaker from ZDNet who wrote about it, and he sends me this screenshot. So he sends them an email so he went to their website, targetingedge.com, and there's a contact us form, and there's an email, info@targetingedge.com. So he sends them an email, hey, they're reaching out for a comment regarding a new report, blah, 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 blah. He gets an error address not found. Okay. So this is like, seriously, this is awesome, and you ain't seen shit. Like, we're just starting. So before we start, I need to tell you, and it's another bit of history about how the old version of OSXPirrit, the one from almost 2 years ago, how it worked. So adware is really popular in Macs. So if like Mac owners tell you, oh, look, we're on Mac, we don't get viruses, we don't get adwares, we don't get pop-ups, call bullshit on this one directly. And adware is really popular, so people go to various websites like Softonic and all of those download websites, and they download whatever they want to download from them, from that website. So let's say someone wants to download VLC Media Player, so he goes to Softonic, he writes VLC Media Player. And he gets like an installer. And this is how all of those adware companies work. Basically, they're calling them installation monetization solution, which is another word for like we're in your computer doing shit. And you get an installer that actually installs the VLC media player, but then you get like herpes with that. That was my analogy from 2 years ago, which is available on YouTube for your own enjoyment. And those installers back then used something that's called a pre-flight script. So you know that when you start the installer, you get this like, oh, welcome to the installer of blah, 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 blah. Click next. And this is even before you see any end-user license agreement. So once you are opening the installer, what's called a pre-flight script runs and starts like installing all of the bad stuff. You'll get the VLC media player after you'll hit next, but all of the bad stuff comes right when you started the installer, before you even looked at the end user license agreement, which I doubt that it tells you about all of that, but whatever. So now we fast forward to last November. So what I did is I started getting samples of new installers and basically new samples of the new OSXPirrit. And when I looked at what's it doing, what's going on, I saw that it sends an HTTP request to that URL. Now, every request had a one-time like ID in there, like a GUID that you had to supply, and that the installer did because every link only worked once. And I wanted to grab a bunch of samples, and the sample that I got, like the one that I got from the logs that we had, the ID didn't work because it was already used. So when everything fails, apply fuckery. That's like my life motto. So I was like, okay, let's try to do this manually. Let's try to take the link, and instead of an ID, let's just send a quote. Just see what happens. Literally the first thing I did. I got back a URL from the server. Like I send a request with a single quote, and I get a URL back from the server. And I was like, okay, let's request that URL. Bam! I get a huge script. This is like 360 something lines, I think. It says so in the next slide. And this is like their installation script. That's what's running before you even like installed anything. And I don't know if you can see it. Hold on. Where do I want to zoom. Like if you look, it's like a word jumble. It's really fun. Like that's what I did for a few weeks. You have like sudo and stuff that runs as root, and like all of those things are happening on your machine, and you have no idea because you didn't read the end user license agreement. And you're probably asking yourself here, like you see right in the middle, there's a sudo kill all OSA script, which is AppleScript, which is fine. And you're probably asking yourself, how do they get root privileges? How can they run sudo? Are they using any kind of exploits? Of course not. So, how many of you are using Macs? Show of hands. Okay, cool. So all the people that use Macs, and if you don't use a Mac, I'm about to tell you that. Most installers, when you run them, they ask for your password. The reason that they ask for your password is to elevate their privileges. In Macs, in OS X, the user that you have is by default on the sudoers list. So if you enter your password, it elevates itself in your root. It's like doing sudo su, basically. So this is how they do it. Like their installer runs and you just ask for your password and you give it your password and it's root. And then you have all of those things running in the background as root. And you can see like a lot of like, it's downloading stuff from a lot of URLs, and we're going to talk about that. So that script is huge. Yeah, as I said, it's 329 lines in bash that I had to go through. It took me 3 days. It's not fun. And it's very similar if not almost identical to the script that I analyzed 2 years ago from OldPirrit, which is not made by them, which was already proven by me, but okay. The script has many URLs that it sends requests to, and a lot of those URLs look like DGA domains. Do we all know what DGA domains are? Show of hands? Okay. So DGA domains are like weird and long and usually random looking domain names, like Q2WEDCFZA number.com. Those domains, like you only see that in malware. Like there's no reason whatsoever for like, oh yeah, email me like at Amit at QA295Z. Like it doesn't make any sense. And this is usually those domains, like there's a logic behind it. Like there's an algorithm that calculates it, makes those domains, and then attackers can basically the malware generates the domains, and the attackers can register the domains way after. So like they will always have a domain that will connect. It's basically it's very hard to block unless you're using some sort of a endpoint solution that I happen to be working for a company that makes one. And we'll see that as well. Now, this is like, do you know the Russian Matryoshka dolls? Like you open one and there's another one and there's another one. This is how it works. Like this thing downloads like 7, 8 different payloads each step of the way. And each payload has like a new thing that it's doing. Now, a payload can be sometimes a script, and it could be a binary file that does stuff. And we're gonna talk about that as well. So what happens is, that script is generating a random name. Like it takes, every Mac has this file, /usr/share/dict/words, and it has words in it, like words from a dictionary. The script, simply, there's a function called RND for random, if you guys over there can see it. And it literally just picks a random word and saves it to a variable. A random word from all of those lists. And then it creates a directory in the user's home directory, that's the tilde, in /library/random name. That random name is generated by that function. What also is happening is that the unique ID of the machine, again, no private data, nothing identifying, it's fine. The unique identifier of the machine is extracted and being sent to targeting edge's servers along with the path and the random name that was chosen. So every time their adware, legit adware, as they say, was installed in your machine, they actually know, like they can identify you by your machine's unique identifier and where and which random word and where it was installed. And if you see here, these are the, God damn it, these are the weird domains. You see here, pw.09aed5mck3. Legit. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's not malware, it's fine. Now, once this data was submitted to their server, the server will send you another payload. This payload will be downloaded and a launch agent will be created for it. Now, a launch agent in Mac speak is basically an autorun. There are several types of autoruns on Mac, but the most important ones are launch agents and launch daemons. A launch agent will start when the user logs in, and a launch daemon will start when the operating system boots, before the user logs in. So that's the difference between the two, and it creates both of them. So launch agents and launch daemons, and they have like 5 different ones of them, so they always have persistence, and they have watchdogs that guard that the other launch agent still exists. So it's fine, it's legit. Then, after this launch agent is being created, so as you can see, it downloads right here. It downloads this archive, this tc.tgz. And that file has a binary in it. So I started looking at that binary as well. I started reverse engineering it, and I looked at just at the names of the functions. Did receive response, did receive data, will cache response, blah, 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 blah. And then run external application that gets arguments. Okay. So IDA Pro, and I'll zoom in. Just a sec. Okay. It calls binsh. Yeah, legit. It calls binsh, and binsh takes an argument. So this is %@. So Objective-C, which is, if there are any iOS or macOS programmers here, wow, Objective-C is terrible. So Objective-C, like what you know as %s from C or Python is %at in Objective-C, sort of. So it actually calls binsh and supplies it, like you can supply an argument with it, so someone on their end can run whatever he wants on your machine. That's fine. So as I said, it calls and it runs stuff with binsh just like a rat. It is code signed. So here's an interesting thing about code signatures. So all of the binaries that were dropped by the old version of Pirrit from 2 years ago, all of them were signed. And the interesting thing is that they were signed and the names on the certificates were Israeli. And being Israeli, I can identify Israeli names, so that's not an issue. And since the beginning, I knew like, oh, that has to be Israelis. Because there's also a lot of Israeli companies, Israeli ad tech companies in Israel because, well, we don't really have computer crimes law. Like, it's not a thing. But I didn't know that it was that company. I thought it was a different company. The cool thing about 2 years ago, what happened is, every time I found another binary, I had like a script that automatically just like gives me a list every day of the new binaries and the new signers. I would send an email to my contact in Apple, and Apple would revoke the certificates. Within 20 minutes, they had a new certificate. So it was insane. Like, they had tons of them. This is illegal, because in order to get signing certificates from Apple, you need to send them some sort of an ID. I don't think they had like 250 people working for them. So those IDs weren't real. And that's illegal as well. But it's fine. It's fine. This payload was signed, but it wasn't properly signed. It was signed with an ad hoc signature, which has no meaning on macOS. The reason is because ad hoc signatures are used to develop apps for iOS. Now, I have no idea why they did that. Like the actual component in the operating system, which is the AMFI trust cache, doesn't even exist in macOS. My theory, and I have no proof for it, is that it was signed like this basically to throw off antiviruses. So they would say, "Oh, this is legit. This is signed. This is fine." And that payload also enumerated the list of running processes to check if there are any browsers running, because as we need to remember, this is, while it is a very malicious adware, this is still adware. Like, the whole point of this thing is to see where you're going, where you're browsing, and display ads for you that were meant for you, that were targeted for you. Like, their name is Targeting Edge for a reason. And that payload was constantly looking to see if you have any browsers running. Now, that payload also installed another launch agent, using the random naming convention from before. So on my testing machine, it created created a random name, roadless, and that was the name of the package. Okay, roadless. And then it downloads more payloads. Yay! Inside that tar.gz file, there were a bunch of files, as you can see. Like, there's something that's called browser enhancer that we'll talk about, install updater.sh, blah, 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 blah. In protector? Wait, protector? The fuck? So, basically, to serve ads and protect their own ass. Protector is a binary file, and it has only one purpose. It wants to see that all the payloads are running, and all the launch agents and launch daemons are there. And if they are removed, for any reason, they will be reinstalled. So Protector protects. Protector also sets up a launch daemon with a random name. However, since I sort of uncovered in my last report how they generate the names, like the name generation thing with the dictionary is not new. But in order to make things different for the Protector, they have an extra file called names.db, as you can see here. And this file has also a list of strings, and it just gets like 2 strings from there and builds a word. Not really clever, but it's just a different way of generating random names. Protectors and updaters installation script. So there's another script called updater there, update.sh. They're also doing another weird thing, which I found odd. They're removing a browser plugin, like in case you have it, like they check if you have a browser plugin called OmniKey. And if you do have it, they just remove it. Again, this is fine. And I didn't know what this plugin was, so I started reading, and apparently it's a plugin that allows you to, you know how in Chrome you go to the address bar and you just type something, not an address, and it Googles? So it's basically, it's basically to create custom requests like that, custom searches. So you can say, okay, so here's the URL to search in eBay, and then you just do eBay space query, enter, and it search in eBay. Now, apparently, this really screws with their malware, so they just remove it altogether without telling you. And this was another cool thing. This is why I named the talk the Da Vinci Code, because for a while I was really curious. Like, I called it Pirrit because I saw a string Pirrit in there, and when I Googled, I saw that it's a Windows adware. But I was like really curious. How do they name it like in there? Like, they don't come to work and they say, oh, we have a new version of Pirrit coming out. But luckily, they suck at OPSEC. So everything is documented, as you will see. So while the script is installing, there's like this echo installing Da Vinci. And I'm like, okay, cool, Da Vinci. So let's talk about browser enhancer. Let's take a moment. I stared at it once for 3 minutes until I figured out like it's fucking with me. You didn't realize that! Or I'm an idiot. Either or. Okay. In my previous reports, when I reverse engineered their binaries, I saw that they're using the Qt programming framework. Now, if you're not familiar with Qt, which is actually pronounced cute, so why did you write it Qt? I don't know. Qt is basically a framework that allows you to write code one time, and then when you're compiling it, you can say, oh, I want to compile it to Linux or Mac or Windows, and you don't have to do like all the adaptations. The disadvantage, the con in this, is that you get all of the Qt crap bundled into your code. So when I was looking at the code, when I was reverse engineering it, I could see like all the types, like a QString, and it calls a free, and like it's the function from Qt. So again, this is another thing that ties it back to them, because this looks exactly like the code they wrote, but they still say that it's not them, even though their names were in the fucking thing. Okay. Now, browser enhancer. So that's a whole bundle that's being downloaded to your Mac. And browser enhancer will look for browsers in order to change their settings. Again, we're not taking over the browsers, right? They're not doing it. But this is exactly what it does. Now, browser enhancer is looking for the following browsers: Firefox, Safari, Chrome, and Microsoft Internet Explorer? On a Mac? What year is this? But this had happened before. So I actually found this, like there was I also showed it in the old report, so I could find like registry strings inside code that was supposed to run on Mac. I have no idea what kind of wizardry was pulled in order to make this thing compile. Because I have no idea, but okay. But again, like this is another thing that ties it back to them. So browser enhancer's purpose is to literally hijack the search page of the browser, a thing that they said, like their attorney wrote us that they are not doing. But here it is in front of you. Like you can see that it's tracking every cookie that you get. It's hijacking your search page. So if you used to search in Google or Bing, you don't do that anymore. You use a different page. And they're using AppleScript, which is something that they didn't do. Now I'm gonna talk about AppleScript, and because it was also mentioned in their letter. AppleScript is a scripting language that Apple made, and I'm gonna talk about it. And it's actually a really cool thing that you should all be scared of. So this is the search page that you now have. tikasearch.com, very legit. Everybody knows that. And if you look at the bottom of the page, it is copyright 2017 to Babylon Limited, another great Israeli company that does adware. Like, do you remember the Babylon translator from like ages ago? Yeah? No? Yeah? It's them! That's what they do! You think that you're translating words from Japanese? No! Okay. So every time it's like, okay, cool, this payload does that. I wrote, so This presentation doesn't have all the details. If you're really interested, you should read the full report on our blog. It's like almost 30 pages long because it has more and more and more payloads. And at that point, I was like, okay, you're threatening me. That's cool. Let's dance. I'm down. I'll write 30 pages just to fuck back with you. So once browser enhancer is finished running, it will execute another post-installation script called postinstall.sh. How lovely. And it downloads another payload. And it downloads a binary this time that's called macver. I have no idea what it stands for. Macver will be renamed to yet another randomly generated name using the old method that I showed you before. And after that, it will create a file called com.application.plist, and it will put it in tilde in like your home directory, library / preferences. So this directory on Mac, which exists in every one of your home directories, has a lot of preferences, like the distance of the icons in your dock, and like all sorts of OS preferences. Now, if you'll create a file called com.application.plist in there, you'll think that it's perfectly legit and it's fine. Like you won't think that it's something malicious unless you know what you're doing. And again, they say like we're not trying to hide ourselves. Everything is fine. Everything is documented. We're legit. Yeah. Now, if we look at the browser post install script, it changes a bunch of things, and it also adds a bunch of things to the Mac equivalent of the registry. So the bottom screenshot is actually what you can see as it actually says if you go to Google, then send the user to a different page, like the loadingpages.info thing, and it sends the ID of your machine back to them, like right here. So if you used to use Google, then you don't use it anymore, but they know that you wanted to go to Google, and they have the unique identifier of your machine again. Now let's break apart macver a little bit more. So as I said, this is not a script. It is actually a 64-bit Mach-O executable. Mach-O is the executable format in Macs. Windows has PEs, Linux has ELFs, Mac has Mach-O because they have to be different. And unlike all of the other executables, it doesn't import any Qt resources, which was refreshing for a change because this was actually a little bit different. When I looked at the string sections, I saw a bunch of base 64 stuff. Now, we're all intelligent enough to know that base 64 is super secure. Like if you want to hide something, if you want to encrypt something, you encrypt it in base 64. So I get a lot of DMs on Twitter, like, teach me how to hacks, bro. So first, like pro bono, always encrypt with base 64. So I'm very good at what I do. So I deobfuscated the base 64, which was a challenge. And there was a lot of AppleScript code in there. Like all of this base 64 stuff was AppleScript. Now let's talk about AppleScript for a sec. So AppleScript is actually a scripting language that was created by Apple, and it was created for automation purposes. And AppleScript goes way back. Like it's an old language, and it actually has a really cool syntax. Like the syntax of AppleScript is English. Like tell application Google Chrome to do something. Like that's the actual syntax. If your machine is running in French, it'll be in French. It's pretty rad. And the whole point of AppleScript was to automate tasks in another processes. So let's say that you need to like run sort of a batch operation. Like you have an application that, I don't know, converts video, but it can only convert one file at a time. Apple basically said, hey, the correct way of writing programs to Mac OS is you should create an AppleScript API for every program that you make. So if you want to fully comply with Apple's guidelines, then your program should have like a third-party API with AppleScript. So you could like tell video encoder to select all files from this directory and click the button that says submit. I don't know, like just an example. So when you think about it, it's basically code injection. And you don't have to be privileged. So if in Windows, sometimes you have to be privileged in order to get a handle to a remote process and inject a DLL to that process that does something you want to do, you don't need that in Apple. You basically write AppleScript and you don't need to elevate yourself. So, yo dog, I heard you like code injection. So we used AppleScript to inject code that injects out JavaScript. So basically what they're doing with all of that AppleScript code is they're finding out which browser is running. So you can see, like, if is Safari running, then tell application Safari to set page source to do JavaScript and then just a whole bunch of JavaScript to it. So you don't even know it, and you're running Chrome, you're running Firefox, you're running Safari, or you're a wizard and you're running Microsoft Internet Explorer on a Mac. Yeah. If you can make it happen, I want to talk to you. No, not with wine. Natively, that supports AppleScript. I know wine. Been doing this for like a year. So you don't even know it, and you think that your browser is like super secure, and like, yeah, I'm using Chrome, and like Google cares about security, or Firefox cares about security, or the Safari, or Microsoft Internet Explorer. But you actually have code that's being actively injected all the time into your browser. So basically, every page that you visit, every site that you go to, every query that you send, and whatever site that you go to, like if you go to the source, you all of a sudden see like JavaScript that's not supposed to be there. And it was injected there via code injection, which is completely fine in like Apple's world. Like here is another example in Chrome. Tell application Google Chrome to tell active tab of window 1 to set source HTML to execute JavaScript. It's fine. This is fine. So this is basically what's happening behind the scenes. So you have macver, which is their like malicious binary that's running on your machine. And here's the interesting thing. So there are ways of doing stuff in a stealthy fashion. They don't believe in that. So they basically just do like system, and then they call an application that's called OSXPirrit. And OSXPirrit is the AppleScript interpreter. So they basically, so you can run in your Mac, you can do like OSXPirrit -- help and see like what it does. But you can do like OSXPirrit space hyphen, I think it's D, and then open quotes and just give it a bunch of AppleScript. And what will happen is that you will always see a process called OSXPirrit doing stuff. Now, because it's a command line argument, so if you have like any advanced endpoint protection system like the one that we're making, for example, you'll be able to see it. It's fairly easy. Like if you'll enable even the most simple auditing tools that are even like, some of them are built into macOS, you'll be able to see like OSXPirrit and all the things that it does. So basically, OSXPirrit sends JavaScript to Google Chrome, and it also asks Google Chrome, hey, what URL are you currently visiting? What site is currently open? And it gets it, and according to that site, it will send it more JavaScript. So you could see things like, and I think I have a screenshot of that later on. I was basically going to Google, and I wrote antivirus, and I hit enter. So it gave me a bunch of results, and then it opened a pop-up for an antivirus company that's completely legit. Like, no, seriously, completely legit. So I wonder, like, who spends money on advertising there, and if they know that they're actually advertising through these nefarious ways. Now, something about the old version of Pirrit. So this was actually a very refreshing change. The old version of Pirrit, and I talked about, like, the talk is on YouTube, you can find it. The old version of Pirrit actually downloaded and installed a proxy server that ran on your machine. It's reconfigured through the firewall that every HTTP request will go through the proxy that runs on your machine. And the proxy would plant all the ads and do all this fuckery. Now, since it's super easy to block it, and since I literally told every AV company in the world how to do it, they don't do it anymore. So they reverted to AppleScript, which is actually pretty clever because they're using the operating system's tools against itself. OSXPirrit is a legit Apple binary. It's signed by Apple. Like it's fine. But yet you can use it to inject malicious code into browsers without doing anything crazy. All you have to do is speak English or French. So this is what they did with AppleScript. The major caveat of that is that it's super slow because the process, that thing, if we go back, that loop happens every second. So your browser is polled every second, and every second it injects code to it. And sometimes, if the timing isn't right, if the code is being injected like right when the thread in the browser is loading the page that you're visiting, your browser will totally crap up. It will either crash or it'll start do weird things like half loading a page and telling you it's done. So, and it also it's really slow. It's really slowing your machine. So if you work on your Mac and you have weird stuff like this happening to you, check which processes are running. See if OSXPirrit is running. Check it for time to time. Like if you're in an organization and you have some sort of system where you can query all the running processes and all across your organization, look for OSXPirrit. Like a lot of attackers are using it. You can use OSXPirrit, and people are doing it. If you know Vis on Twitter, Dan Tentler, he did this whole talk on how he abused this guy's Mac as a part of an engagement. I think it was a reporter. How he did all sorts of crazy shit just with AppleScript. And all he did is use OSXPirrit. So it's also very easy to detect if you know what you're looking for. I think I talked about that. So as I said, they're really good at OPSEC, right? So you can actually run macver in debug mode, and you'll get all the output. So here's a nice example. So I went to Google, I wrote error, right? So you can see, and this runs every second. And you can see that it got the full URL of what I was looking for. Here's the query, right? And then it said, okay, let me give you let me give you this ad that's served from loadingpages.info, and here's a JavaScript, and here's my identifier of my machine, so they know exactly who I am, even though they say they don't. Here's the address, HTTPS Google, blah, 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 blah. And then I got an ad for a fake AV this time that's called MacKeeper. Any of you heard about MacKeeper? Show of hands. Okay, so MacKeeper, wow, that would be awesome if I will get sued by them as well. MacKeeper are if you'll Google them, you'll see that something isn't really straight in there. They actually hired a guy who I won't say his name, and they would use to release report, and the report said the MacKeeper Security Research Center. They're basically, their whole point is selling you a fake AV. They're infecting you, and then they're saying, oh, we're the only one that can remove OSXPirrit from your machine. Buy our AV. And then you buy their AV, and you get AIDS. So, and there's a market like MacKeeper, and they were sued, and there was it's all in Google. I'm not making it up. So you get ads for them, and you get all sorts of weird ads. So here you can see, I have a screenshot, I remembered. I Googled error, and then I had this tab opening. Attention, clean your Mac. Virus scan is recommended for Macs. It's also recommended for humans, I think. If you go to get your physicals, kids. So this is how basically things are working. Now let's talk about attribution, because at the beginning I said the reason why Targeting Edge started sending me threat letters was I wrote on Twitter, the idiots from Targeting Edge are at it again. And they didn't like it. So when I found out who they are, it was actually because I was super lazy, and it's in one of my reports. So I downloaded another one of their payloads, and I think my VM was acting up, and I didn't want to open it on my machine. I didn't want to unpack the archive on my machine. So I said, okay, I just want to see which files are in there. So it was a tar archive. So with tar, you can just list the files that are in the tar without extracting them. It's basically like doing an LS inside the tar. Now the cool thing, and I didn't even think about that back then, because of the fact that tar is a POSIX file format. When you create a tar archive, it will create the tar archive, and inside the tar archive, it'll save the original ownership metadata of the file inside the tarball. And where it says now Batman staff, it had the names of like their VP R&D and one of their devs. Because who thought about it, right? So they actually developed it on their own machine, and like the full name, like first name and last name was their username. So again, because I told everyone that that's how they do it, they now change it to Batman. However, all the names of the files are the same. Now, even though that in all of their letters they insisted that they have absolutely nothing to do with OSXPirrit, like they have nothing to do, and they said, you shamed us on stage, we have nothing to do with this, you smeared Targeting Edge's fine name. And I was like, your names are in there, like I'm not lying. But the thing is that I can do this attribution again, mainly for two reasons. One, I've done this before. And the way that I found them with like all the YAR rules and stuff, I didn't put everything in my reports. I saved some for myself because I like OPSEC. And now I have a pretty good knowledge of their like coding style and TTPs and whatever. So what do we have so far? We have code that looks almost identical to the code from 2 years ago, right? We have methods, the scripts, the names of things, the servers, the way that everything like ties together, and it's almost identical to my findings from 2 years ago. And we also have frantic letters from their attorneys telling us that it's not them, which is obviously bullshit. But they're telling us this is not us, and don't publish anything that's related to our intellectual property. All of this, if anyone follows me on Twitter, I had like a crazy thing with her like 2 weeks ago. Now, with all of this, this is not really proof. So what is proof? So let's talk about domains, right? So when Targeting Edge are buying their domains, they usually buy them in batches of 8 or 10. Like that's what I saw on ThreatCrowd. But there was one batch where they didn't pay the extra whatever dollars for the domain privacy. So there were a bunch of domains that were all linked to an IP address because it was different domains tied to the same server. And those domains were registered by the name of the CEO at targetingedge.com. It's not them, right? So if you do a simple whois, you see that the admin organization is Targeting Edge, and the admin name is literally their CEO. And like, here's their office address, which is actually not really far from our own office in Tel Aviv. But we also have a resume of their employee who really liked my report and wanted to work for us. And in his resume, he said, my work appeared in Cybereason Labs report and itnew.com article. You can't make this shit up. Seriously. Like, seriously. Wow, the letter that I'm going to get in a few days. Oh, boy. Now, here's the funny thing. Remember that we don't use any exploits and it's all fine? If you click the link of the second one, the itnew.com article, you get this. One of their adware, not Pirrit, another one, exploited the well-known, now not zero-day anymore, root pipe exploit in OSX. We're not using any exploits. Their own employee literally wrote that on his resume. I don't know what to tell you guys. And basically that wraps everything up. So, Before I take questions, if you guys have them, because we wrapped up 9 minutes before time is up, I need to take a selfie with you all. Yay! Okay. FOMO. Okay. So, just a few words. I couldn't do all of this, and I couldn't stand on the stage and like talk in like being so calm and basically just shit posting live on stage on this company if it weren't for our legal department who worked with me. And this was like a thing that we did together. I sat with one of our corporate counsels, and like we were together on this. And every letter that they sent us, we had to address. Like every letter, everything, every word that was on this letter, I had to sit down with our attorney that is not a technical guy. Like he is technical to a certain level, right? He doesn't know how to reverse engineer code. And I had to sit with him with IDA Pro and telling him, here, you see, here they say that they don't do that. Here, they're doing that right here. So if you end up being in a case where you reverse engineer something and you're doing research and you're starting to get threat letters, don't act on your own. Don't be a hero. Don't say, oh, fuck them, I can do everything by myself, because you have to have a guy that knows the law that works with you, a guy or a girl, someone, right? Inclusion. It's not funny. You have to have someone that knows what he's doing or what she's doing. Wow, we don't have this problem in Hebrew. No, I like everyone. I'm fine. Believe me. So this is super important. Like, if you end up getting legal threats, and it's not the first case where adware companies sent legal threat letters to researchers. I think it's just the funniest one. And I'm sure that I'm going to run into them again because my Yara rules are still working. And you know what? Even though after all of that happened, they're still like doing their thing. Like, people still get infected. Like, after my old research, they were quiet for a while and they got back. And now they have lawyers, which they didn't have before. So, this is nuts. And yeah, and if you're interested in all of that and you want to get to the more technical aspects, feel free. Like, you're all welcome to read the report in the Cybereason blog. It's super long and super detailed. I couldn't cram all of the information into this deck because I also had to tell the story, which is really fun. And any of you have any questions?
So obviously there's cost to the company for some aspects of what they're doing, such as setting up the EGA domains. Those are essentially burner domains, right? They have to keep on setting those up, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So if enough people are not falling for the bait, but are hitting their stuff and making them set up new domains, doesn't that cost start to roll the other way up?
Domains are actually like small change. Domain, you can get a domain for $6 for 2 years or a year. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't. Domains are small change. Like, when they used to do the Apple certificates, every certificate is $99. And it's not only $99, like, you have to give them an excuse on why do you want this certificate. And, you have to send them, like, photo ID and stuff. And someone needs to work, like, there's a graphic designer there that probably just, like, generates passports or something. Super illegal. So I honestly, like, and I was talking about it with our legal, department, like, how do they make money? Like, running such an operation, all the servers, hiring devs, like, all of this, it costs money. I guess they're making money. Like, I honestly, like, this is expensive. It's not like, you know, it's not like running a giant megacorp. Like, it's not that expensive, but it's not cheap. So I honestly don't know how do they make a profit out of this. But I guess they do.
You guys give him an interview?
Fuck no. When I got his resume, so it was February of last year, I went to meet my family in London. I landed in Boston. I turn on my phone. The recruiter from Tel Aviv sends me an email. You gotta see this. Like, that was the subject. Usually that's things I don't click on. And it was that guy's resume, and I was like, what the fuck? Who does that? And the answer is no. However, I checked a while ago. I don't know. I checked like 8 months ago. He works at a security company. Yeah. So with the first version of Pirrit, I wrote a bunch of removal scripts. And I put them on my own GitHub, but the problem was that every time, like, they released a new version every day because it was actually effective because the first period was like an outbreak. And I couldn't keep up. Like, I can't like reverse engineer this malware every day because I have other things to do. So what I did is, I shared it with a bunch of colleagues from other companies. And like back then we didn't have, like today we have an antivirus, like an NGAV, because of course. But back then we didn't have it. So actually other companies, I think Malwarebytes put in the signature in their product, and then it became a thing. And then the IOCs were in Alien Vault, so other AV companies just started basing their signatures off of that. So I think that with Pirrit, every AV that's up to date will remove it now because of that. After that thing happened, the same thing. I did the same thing. Yeah. Time's up. Okay. If anyone wants to ask me questions, I'm outside. Thank you very much.